Okay. Hi guys. This is a very exciting day. Um, I already have to change a slide because of the last talk. You'll see if you can spot it. Before I give this talk, I want to say uh, the talk in and of itself, the display here, is a comment on the current state of machine learning, because every slide has been done by using machine learning algorithm to suggest how my slide should look. I provide the pictures and the text, and then the computer did the rest. So to the extent that they're ugly, machine learning isn't very good yet, and to the extent they look good, machine learning is very good. Okay, machine learning norms and data collection. So I'm a social scientist, I claim these days, although I started out as a mathematician, and I won't spend much time on technical details. Instead, I will try and talk today about how norms, why we need to think about norms when we're predicting the future of technology, and what we think about these things, really. Yeah. Okay. So, the Information Society 2.0, a life you can Google. This is a possible future. A possible future is a world where everything is available to you. Every information is available. I wouldn't say with a click of a button, because there is no way that's not going to be voice controlled, or possibly just mind controlled. But you can get any information you want about anything. You can get movies of every time someone has picked their nose. People's risk of cancer. You can know about whoever you want. You'll have computer systems that can easily predict exactly what you like and cater to those needs, so that you can sit in your cocoon with Netflix and your favorite chocolate without even having to order any of them. You will know what these other people are talking about. You will know what your partner is talking about with other people, and how they feel about other people, and whether they're sexually aroused by other people. There is nothing out there that you won't know. This is the Googleable life. Okay. So the question then becomes, are we going there? Machine learning is growing rapidly. And what machine learning can do is detect patterns and retrieve specifics from large data sets. This is what it's good at. That turns out to be a much bigger thing than you think when you hear it first time, because it also means that you can understand images, faces, and so on. But this is basically all it does. And it's getting very, very good at it very fast. See, they didn't correct my spelling error on the other hand. Okay, so the technology for life that you can Google is actually already here. Last years, we've seen a huge advance in machine understanding of images, where they can see what's on the image and correctly categorize it. They detect, recognize faces, detect emotions, detect voices, and so on. This is all you need to be able to say, I want to hear what Anders said today. This technology is already there. They're at 97 to 99% with voice recognition, depending on who you're talking to, or depending on if you trust the Chinese government. Okay, so the technology is here. The ways of gathering this data is here. These should all be familiar to you, except perhaps this one. This is a wristband that checks your heart rate and skin connectivity and so on. So it can't detect what emotion you're having, but it can detect if you have strong emotions. Okay, so those two are done. So the big question that remains is, will we gather this data? If we gather this data and allow ourselves to share it, then we're at Information Society 2.0. And there's a big talk to be had about the good sides of that and the bad sides of that, and the huge effect and ramification that we're probably underestimating as racial integration is growing due to online dating. This is not the talk for that. I don't have the time. While we might be speeding up a confusion, I'm still talking at the normal speed. So this will all be about, will we go there? Okay. I will talk about three actors: the government, companies, and people. I haven't worked in government, so I have a quite positive view of government. So we can imagine that government, and we're talking about Western governments in, again, not China. But government want to increase the well-being of people, and they want to be re-elected. This is standard assumption. They also have the power to regulate markets and regulate business. Companies want to maximize their profit, but needs to abide by regulations and needs to avoid public outrage.
So this is capitalist, privately owned companies, union companies.
Yes. There are quite a lot of companies and a lot like that. We have NGOs and so on, then we'll be somewhere in the middle, but I isolate these as the three big actors. The third one is people. And people have complicated desires that change over time compared to these others where we can easily just state what they want. They have norms. There seems to be, I want to say, a genetic feature in humans that we care a lot about what others do, what others think, what institutions do, how people handle different things. Now, we can't say from the start what people will think, but the fact that they will care seems very basic to us. Okay. So the way we usually model this care about what others do and so on is through norms, social norms that govern the behavior of others, but we can also extend it to govern the behavior of institutions and government. Norms, it turns out, are based in emotions. They are rarely logical. One of the big researchers in the field, Jonathan Haidt, likes to say that the emotional tail wags the rational dog. Our rationality is mostly used to give reason to our feelings. If you take a person, you ask them about whether two people who are siblings, but both adult and want to have sex with each other, whether or not they should be allowed to do that, they can sit for hours upon hours trying to think of rational reasons for why not, but the true thing is that they had a negative emotional reaction, and now they're just trying to find the reason for it. Okay. Norms are also constantly changing. This is a spittoon. Once it was the norm that you could spit on the floor. Then it was the norm that you can only spit in spittoons. And now it's the norms that you can't spit indoors at all anymore. This just happened. There has to be a reason for every norm shift. And these reasons can be very weird. But when I say there has to be reasons for the norm shift, it's because there's an inertia in the norm changing process. There is a general tendency to punish people who break the norm, who do something differently. This tendency becomes larger the more hegemony there is in the current norm. So when a new norm comes around, when someone starts to say, we shouldn't do this, we should do this instead, they have to have some advantage. Either that they're prepared to punish more, they have better argument, technology has shifted so that people's preferences are on that side. There has to be something more for the norms to change. Technology, which is what we'll focus on today, can change norms, but only by changing people's preferences. And these preferences can be everything from harm to just laziness. Institutions, and here it's both companies, the government, and NGOs, wherever, sometimes manage to shift norms, but it's hard and expensive. There are massive amounts put into changing hygiene norms in areas of the world where people don't wash their hands after going to the bathroom. There is some success, but it's not great. Every agency wish that they had the power to change norms, and in a few occasions they've managed to, but they usually try to stay away from it and instead find a way to get the thing they want to sell to fit in the current norm. Some core values that I want to bring up today, and these are not the only core values people have, but these are the ones that are going to be interesting today. And some core values that determine these norm preferences, the systems where you can go in and change the norms and where you can have your arguments, are things like harm, fairness, freedom, and privacy. And I put them in that order because roughly I would say that's how people rank them. And we don't have a perfect system for measuring how people rank them, but usually when they compete with each other, the majority of the population goes this direction. If we have to sacrifice privacy to decrease harm, we'll do that. Okay? So, privacy is the major issue here when we're talking about collecting data. So what are the current norms about privacy? There is some research on this. There is so far from enough research on this, considering how important it is, considering how much discussion there is within law, within philosophy, about the ethics of privacy, and thinking about privacy in this quite academic, abstract way. There is too little research on how people actually think about their privacy and about their data, which turns out to be quite different from the way we usually think about privacy. So I already touched on the fact that safety is more important than privacy. And here is, after the huge privacy entrenchments that were put into law after 9/11 in the US, and whether or not people think that this is too much restriction on civil liberties, or if it's not far enough to save the country, and the majority think that it's not far enough to protect the country. People get scared from harm, and privacy doesn't evoke as much emotion, it gets beat. Okay? Privacy is about, for people, as far as we understand it, is about being in control. It's not that they're worried about other people having their data, it's about they want to select who has their data and what data is it. This is not changing. Sometimes you hear that the young people will have a complete different view of privacy. This does not seem to be changing. Younger people are sharing more stuff online, but they're also using more techniques to choose what they share. They are more likely to use incognito, they're more likely to have fake accounts and so on to choose whether or not a specific website get their information. Okay? Okay, so now we get back to our actors. What do we think the government will do when it comes to gathering this data that will move us towards the Googleable life, towards Information Society 2.0? First, this is just the basic question. Will the government start using their already existing data? It turns out from machine learning that we can use data in ways that we had no ideas about. That we can predict things that we didn't think possible because these pattern detections are so good at large data sets. And the government already have massive data sets. So will they start using it? Will Arbetsförmedlingen start using algorithms to say how they should react to a person coming into their office, depending on their background? Does this person actually need any meetings at all, or is it likely that they just have a job in 2 weeks' time, and we can bother with them if they're still unemployed in a month? Or does this person need direct contact with something, and so on? They're currently investigating that. I think we can safely say that they will do that pretty soon. Will hospitals, will healthcare take in more algorithms to, if not diagnose people, at least have programs that tell you maybe this person should come in for a checkup. Maybe this is a test you should look at. And then in the end, doctors deciding still, because we're not yet comfortable with leaving it. We can say very likely A perhaps more far out thing, using health data combined with where people live and combined with things like when people become unemployed or other bad things happen in their life, we're likely to be able to detect potential domestic abuse. Will we do it? Will we start reacting proactively to things that we might not have happened yet? Investigate things on an algorithm suggestion? And this becomes an even bigger issue if the government start using other available data. Twitter can find people who have schizophrenia. Using Twitter data, you can find people who have schizophrenia. Government is the organization that takes care of people with schizophrenia. We'll start using this to look up people who have not yet connected hospital care about their schizophrenia. Facebook can be used to find at least potential terrorists. I want to say about this that there's no evidence that these people are terrorists compared to this, where we actually can identify to what extent the algorithm is correct. But on the other hand, Israel arrested 400 people due to what they had done on Facebook. So in the question, will government start using it? It's very likely, at least for some governments. And if you think that this idea of the government going out and taking care of people before we actually know that they've done something wrong, imagine the following scenario. We have another mass shooting, and now the news is next day that the AI had predicted that this person would have a psychosis, would become violent, and that they had, whichever company had that AI or whichever enterprise, private person, had sent that data to the government, told them that these people are the people you need to watch, and the government had done nothing. Those scenarios are where our laws change the fastest. Those scenarios are where the reaction speed of government suddenly from public outrage becomes very fast, and we can quickly see an increase in this kind of thing, which is also the kind of thing that tends to not go in the other direction. It's hard to stand up there and take away safety systems. Now, I don't want to come off as I'm talking about all this being bad. Of course, to the extent that AI can predict mass shootings and we can stop mass shootings by taking care of lots of people, that's good. That's great. It becomes a very strict issue about how you value wrongly labeled things on both ends. And machine learning just gives you the probability, and you have to yourself say, this is our cutoff point. And if you have a good machine learning algorithm, you'll have knowledge about how many false positives and how many false negatives that means. But you still have to make a decision about how many false positives and how many false negatives you will allow. Okay? Will the government start gathering more data? I was slightly skeptical to this, but already listening today, it seems like I wasn't expanding my mind enough. And I'm scared where that is the case, because I sometimes feel like I'm expanding my mind too much with this, how will the future become? But then people talk about it and it becomes even more than I had thought of. So some new data that I thought of is we start using videos from protests and so on and face recognition technique to track people who are potential security risks, all from neo-Nazis to Antifa. We already have people going home with EKGs and so on and wearing them at home. That's likely to just increase. The more self-reported health data that you can have specifically to people who are already undergoing some, that's just going to be happening. But then apparently we might use automatic locks to track nurse movements, and that wasn't even on my radar. So there'll be some new data. Now the other part is not just gathering the data, but will we let individuals search other individuals on the data? For this information 2.0, people need to be able to search each other. So far, governments, all governments actually, are very hesitant to allow people. I mean, they are slow at allowing people to get their own data. Allowing people to get other people's data, they really don't like that. To the extent that when a company took already lawful, publicly available data about everyone's income and made it easy to search online, actually free of charge, the government was very upset and changed the law so that this was no longer possible. So I would say highly unlikely. Now, will the government start sharing their data with companies? Again, so far, the government does not share their data with companies. Overall, data is not being shared much. There are some examples, some current cases with healthcare data being shared by companies and so on. They are still making public outroar, which is a sign that this isn't common practice. Two possible trends to look out for. As data become more valuable, we will see increased lobbying to make the government data accessible for companies. Google already has the biggest lobbying firm in Washington. This is just to look out for. The second, there has been a trend in the last, at least since the 80s, of government ceding control to companies through free trade deals that allow companies to sue the government, through not taxing monetary movement across borders and so on, making the economy more and more controlled by things that are not our government. This has taken a turn lately. We don't know where it's going to go, but it will be the other thing to look out for if we're worried about government sharing data with industry. So, to sum up, what will the government do? They are very likely to start using already existing government data much more. They will know more about us than ever before. In general, this is also according to norms. Depending on which society you're in, there's a trust in government that differ greatly between societies. We talked about this, someone mentioned the census before and so on. If you look at the census in the US, from a Swedish point of view, it's pathetic data. Like, this is ridiculous. They don't know where people live. Whereas in Sweden, we not that long ago moved from a system where we knew in which building you lived to knowing in which apartment you lived by standardizing apartment numbers. This change went through without any public outroar, without anything. So in some places the norms are fine with government using data. In some places they're less fine. In the extent there's a trend, it's moving towards more trust in government, I would say, rather than less, in a long-term sense. But it varies a lot. Okay. They are likely to start using other available data. They will start gathering more data, but probably not much more. And by much more, I mean the sense that you'll be able to Google everything someone else did. This data will not come from the government. They are not likely to start mandating that everyone has videos at home or anything like this. There's not that type of Big Brother society, does not seem to be in the works. And they are also unlikely to give individuals access to other individuals. I would say it's possible that we get more access to what the algorithms say about us, and that people in the future will have a better knowledge about, say, their cancer risk and so on, and what things they should check up on. That's far from being able to Google everything, though. The one worry, and this isn't, I wouldn't put it as very likely, but if we want to think about what would put us in this society, this would be a good start. If the government start freely sharing their data with companies, we would move much faster towards this information society. Partly because companies are quite happy to let you search other individuals, especially if you're prepared to pay for it. And if you're not prepared to pay for it with money, if you can pay for it with your attention so they can sell ads, there are plenty of internet sites already where you can look up people. They're not very good because they haven't implemented good machine learning yet. They'll give you like, oh, this is their Facebook page and this is a link to where they live and so on. I looked myself up before. It was really underwhelming, the amount of information they could get on me. And I haven't been careful with my data. Okay, so what will companies do? First question, will companies collect massive amounts of new data? This is just one company. This is Google, and this is just their latest stuff. This is Google Mini. Google Home Mini sits in your home and tracks everything that's being said. It doesn't record it unless you say OK Google first. But the difference between them recording everything and recording only the stuff after OK Google is a line in the privacy thing that you're signing right now. You can imagine if this hits it off and people start using this a lot, it can be used to control basically anything in your home that has a Wi-Fi, as well as just look things up like the weather or your calendar and so forth, right? If people start using them a lot, like you said, you can't not be on Facebook. How about when you can't not have a Google Mini at home? What can you do with the privacy stuff then? I don't want to paint out Google as particularly bad. They're no different from other companies, but data is becoming valuable and they want it. In fact, these are not making much money. Like they're not, the amount it took to produce them is not really being covered. And one possibility that the reason they still did it, and not just them, Amazon has another version and Samsung has a version that they're working on, is that the important part of this thing right now isn't making money. It's gathering data. And not for nefarious reasons. When it comes to speech to computer understanding or speech to text, there's still big issues with dialects and so on. Having these in just 1 million homes is going to give you the kind of data that allows you to make sure that your machine algorithms is updated to take care of dialects. So here is the earbuds that are being released with the new Google Phone Pixel. They have a microphone. Oh, I have less time than I hoped. They have a microphone and they can constantly track, and they are being turned on by a flick of the finger right now. With the smart driving cars, there comes 8 cameras that are constantly tracking around you. So, okay. So, will companies collect massive amounts of data? Yes. If we let them, they will. Will they share the data? 6 of the 11 largest credit companies in the US share customer data with non-affiliates. They give away what you bought to anyone who is prepared to pay for it. And it doesn't get much more sensitive, the kind of stuff we already have digitalized than that. People tend to think that they have more control over the gathered information than they have. They believe that most websites would allow them to delete the information that they entered into the website. Most websites do not allow that. They are generally okay with companies sharing the information that they think that they give, but they're usually giving a lot more information than they think that they give. So for instance, if they enter the address, they're kind of fine with that address being shared by the company. But when they go into a website and their IP is tracked and thereby their location, they don't know that, and they don't like the notion that that could be shared without them having actually entered it. So it's back to this issue of control. There is also a strong norm, and this becomes very specific, but it is a strong norm against sharing things that is perceived to cause harm. There was an uproar in Australia when a newspaper reported that Facebook had allowed people with ads to target teenagers with low self-esteem. Facebook claims that this wasn't true, it seems likely that it wasn't actually true. But it would be the kind of sharing of information, the kind of packaging of information that would be against the current norms. The social norms I want to specify, there was nothing in doing that that was illegal in any way, shape, or form. So what will companies do? They'll collect as much data as they're allowed. They share as much data as they're allowed. What will people do? Okay. Will people record their biological information? These are different ways of recording your biological information. This is the Nike Apple shoes. These ones track your temperature as well as your heart rate. This tracks your skin connectivity, giving you emotion and so on. Right now, having this kind of information isn't very useful to you. It needs to be connected to something else about your life to really be able to answer interesting questions. So right now, this isn't spreading very much, and I think it's unlikely to be the first thing to pick up. Will people continue to record sound? There are norms against recording each other. There are no legal norms against it, but there are social norms against recording each other. Those norms are weaker than the ones for images. It's very rare where you'd be okay with filming someone but not recording it on your phone. Okay? Or even taking photos compared to recording. So right now, it wouldn't be okay to just track each other. In your home, those norms are a little weaker. There are places where they're a little weaker. We're going to talk a bit about that. But here, I want to highlight that this turns out to be the key in many ways. If we go over this threshold, if we start to continuously record sound from each other, there's no problem with the data storage here. Everyone recording everything at a reasonable quality in the world right now for a year would amount to 1,000 of the size of the internet in 2014, when the last was a big scientific study measuring the size of the internet. We have the data storage to do this. A lot of the questions that you might want to ask, you can already do here, especially if you add the vitals again. If you add the biological information and the voice, you get something completely different. Now you can tell who in your life are you aroused by, who is stressing you out, who is stressing someone else out, who is, what kind of situation are you in when you're feeling these feelings and so on. Okay? Legal restrictions to this? None. If you're present, you are allowed to record others. That's where we are right now, as I understand it, but there might be a legal expert that can speak to the issue. Excellent. Practical. This is norms right now. Are there? Are they strong enough when it's practical to do it the other way? Already we're seeing these Google Home, which are betting that it's so practical for you that you don't have to press a button to turn them on, that you basically want them on all the time. That you can voice control them without pressing that button is so practical that you're going to want it. Health. When it comes to harm against privacy, harm beats out. There are several categories of people who, for health reasons, might benefit from continuously tracking their life. People with Alzheimer's, people with autism, where the computer program could tell them the emotions that the other person who's speaking to you are having, and we can do emotion detecting already from speech right now. People who are stressed out and forget things or instructions from their boss and so on might need it. Will people continuously record visuals? Probably not as much. I think recordings will come first, but there are a few things that visual gives you. Fear of missing out. This is the Google Clip camera. It's based on machine learning. It tracks how the people in your family and how your pets look, and then it takes photos when they see them and try to make those photos more and more to your liking. It's constantly on. Safety issues. If you can actually have cameras that track other people, you can detect crime without any effort, CCTV cameras can immediately call the police, but you could also wear them as you're walking home, being sure that you could identify and continuously upload the data if someone were to attack you. So if we move towards a life we can Google, this is the likeliest path. More use of online data, then continuous sound recordings, then recordings of vitals, and then continuous image recordings. Once we have the data, if it's available to us, will we search? We will be able to answer fundamental questions about health, work, and love. We will be allowed to live in the past and have insights about our future. We will be able to learn everything about our friends and foes, all the social information. Like the people in the Garden of Eden, I will say it's highly likely that we eat this apple, if it's available to us, whether or not it has positive effects for us. So, if people start collecting large quantities of data for companies, and companies are not regulated, we will have a life we can Google. Two big questions as I end it. What effect would that have on society and well-being? Is there a way to harvest the good that would come out of this and regulate away the bad? I leave those unanswered. Thank you.